Then she saw me. The shocking wedding moment that turned my son-in-law's judgment forever. The sun hung low over the cemetery, casting long shadows that danced like specters among the tombstones. The air was thick with a mixture of joy and sorrow, as the veil of laughter met the chill of loss. It was a wedding day marked by an altar adorned with white roses and a bridal gown that sparkled in the waning light. But beneath the surface a storm brewed, whispering secrets nobody dared to voice. As the bride's father beamed with pride, the handsome son-in-law barely concealed his displeasure. Something was off about him. His eyes flitted nervously between the guests, as if searching for an escape. Then, just as vows were being exchanged, she arrived. The bride's estranged mother, who had been rumored to have vanished years ago, slipped into the back like a wraith. Gasps echoed around the gathering. Who was she to return? And why now? In stunned silence all heads turned. The beautiful bride, caught somewhere between joy and horror, faltered. Her heart raced, and the knot in her throat tightened. Was this a miracle or a curse? Whispers swept through the crowd like wildfire. She's back after all these years. What is she doing here? And through it all, the son-in-law's face went white, his entire demeanor shifting. What kind of secret loomed over them like a dark cloud? The pastor's voice wavered as the tension crackled in the air. It began to feel like a pressure cooker about to burst. Just as words like "I do" hung in the balance, the mother took a step forward, eyes locked onto her daughter, filled with emotion that pierced like a shard of glass. The world held its breath. Was she here to reclaim her place, or to destroy the day they'd all hoped would be perfect? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The atmosphere felt electric, crackling with hidden truths and unspoken words. Just then, the mother raised her hand, trembling slightly, and the moment loomed heavy with unanswered questions. What would she say? Would it be an explanation or an accusation? All eyes were trained on her, the silence stretching thin, like the final seconds before a storm unleashes its ferocity. And then, with a voice that could break stone, she uttered one word. Why? The air changed, the mood shifted. The room trembled as if it anticipated a monumental revelation. Gasps surged anew, and the son-in-law's expression twisted into confusion and dread. This moment would change everything, and no one knew just how deep the rabbit hole ran. What truth lay hidden behind her sudden appearance, and how would it shatter the lives of those gathered? The scene stood on the precipice, ready to tumble into chaos, a chaos that might reveal more than anyone bargained for. The word hung in the air like a heavy fog. Why? It rolled off her tongue with a fury that sent shivers through the crowd. That single syllable broke the dam of composure everyone had been clutching onto, turning joy into something else entirely. The pastor's voice faltered, the vows lost in the hum of disbelief that rippled through the audience. The bride tightened her grip on the bouquet, the satin ribbon cutting into her fingers as she stared at her mother, no longer a ghost, but flesh and blood, brimming with emotion. Confusion flickered on her face, battling with a surge of anger. She had imagined this day so differently. Would the wraith of her past now consume her future? The son-in-law, Martin, remained frozen. His eyes darted from the bride to the mother, the cleft in his brow deepening. This was not part of his plan. Secrets he thought buried were clawing their way to the surface, threatening to sully the golden image he had crafted for himself. And yet, he knew he couldn't remain silent. Voices filled the silence, murmuring in fear and disbelief. Who does she think she is? A voice broke through the chaos, belonging to an older woman who had always maintained the town gossip. Shouldn't she be at home? Another voice dared to join. She abandoned her daughter. Who walks back in like nothing happened? As the words twisted the knife deeper into the mother's heart, guilt washed over her. She had left, yes, but the reasons she vanished were far from simple. The truth was entangled in a web of betrayal and shrouded in the shadows of their lives. Do you even have the right to be here? The bride finally managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt, a simmering rage surfacing. Every eye turned toward her, the daughter torn between the woman who had abandoned her and the desire to understand. The mother took a shaky breath. I'm here because I need to explain. This isn't just about me. Each word felt like glass cutting through her throat, yet she forged ahead. It's about Martin. Gasps erupted again, this time sharper than before. Martin's complexion drained, his eyes widening as if the air had been sucked from the room. What do you mean? He managed to whisper, his voice a blend of disbelief and fear. The bride's expression morphed from anger to confusion, the pieces of the puzzle rapidly shifting around her. The clock ticked loudly in the background, counting the seconds until the truth would spill out. What had the stranger meant? I made a choice to protect you, to protect us all, the mother continued, moving closer, vulnerable yet resolute. But it's time you know the truth about your husband. Who he really is and what he is capable of. Her revelation hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. The crowd inhaled, their breaths collectively hitching. Eyes darted anxiously between the suspects, unsure whether to leap to conclusions or wait for the full story. The silence grew thick, dense with tension, ready to explode. Already, the scent of resignation clung to the bride's skin as she searched Martin's eyes for assurance that crumbled under scrutiny. Would she even recognize the man she said "I do" to just moments before? Just then, a distant sound echoed through the cemetery, a sobbing wail that sent a shiver down spines, pulling attention from the tragic scene. It was a sound neither of them had heard in years, an unmistakable tone that echoed the past like an ominous warning. And in that moment, as Martin stood paralyzed, the crowd held its breath, waiting to see just how far the dark tendrils of the past would reach into their wedding day. What secrets awaited in the shadows, and who truly held the knife? The wailing grew louder, reverberating through the air like an impending storm. It snapped the crowd from their collective astonishment, pushing them back to reality. Whispers turned into gasps as they turned their heads toward the source of the mournful sound. Just beyond the rows of headstones, a figure emerged from the gloom, a woman cloaked in dark fabric, her features obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The air thickened with tension as she approached, each step echoing with purpose. Time seemed to stretch, as if the sun hesitated at its peak, confounded by the unfolding drama. Margaret! The mother's voice trembled with recognition, her heart hammering against her ribcage. The crowd stirred restlessly, uneasy under the weight of her distress. What are you doing here? The woman raised her head, revealing eyes that sparkled with fury and pain. You think you can come back after all these years and just drop a bombshell at your daughter's wedding? Who do you think you are? The words were sharp, slicing through the air. The onlookers exchanged startled glances, their whispers merging into a murmur of confusion. The bride's heart raced as she glanced between her mother and this new arrival. A name stirred inside her, a ghost from stories half remembered. Margaret, the mother began, but the other woman cut her off, her voice rising, drowning out the solemn backdrop of the cemetery. You vanished and now you waltz back in like nothing happened. Do you even realize what you've put everyone through? What you've sacrificed? Martin shifted, his mouth dry, uncertainty etched on his face. He felt as if he were stumbling through a nightmare, one that no amount of luck could pave over. The crowd's anxious expressions began to morph into curiosity, as if they were willing bystanders awaiting an unfolding tragedy they couldn't turn away from. Who are you? The bride spoke, her voice unsteady but fueled by a desperate need for clarity. What do you know about my mother? What's going on? Margaret's gaze locked onto the bride, and a flicker of hesitation passed through the tension. I know everything, dear. About your mother, about Martin here. All of it. She turned, gesturing at Martin with a force that silenced the following whisper. Isn't he what he seems? There are shadows lurking, and you're standing right in the middle of a web he spun. Every word dripped with urgency, igniting uncertainty in the already strained atmosphere. The bride felt her heart drop, a sudden chill sweeping over her that had little to do with the brisk cemetery breeze. Was this stranger really unraveling a riddle that had haunted her for so long? Stop it! Martin burst out, his fury rising, but it only fueled the fire of doubt flickering in the crowd. You don't know what you're talking about. But as he glared back at the crowd, an odd silence took root around them. They had been privy to the silent war between mother and daughter, And now they witnessed a flickering truth that questioned everything they had assumed about the man who would be their new son. "Turns out I know a hell of a lot more than you want to believe," Margaret retorted, her voice steady like the ground beneath them. "And I'm here to make sure everyone else does too." The crowd felt alive with tension, hearts racing as the weight of her claim settled in the air like a dense fog of unease. What had she meant? What secrets lurked behind Martin's carefully maintained image? And then a low rumble began, a distant storm that mirrored the one brewing within the group. Would this wedding become a battleground, exposing truths that had long remained hidden? As Margaret stepped forward, her hand raised as if to unmask the illusion Martin had presented, the crowd held its breath. A revelation was coming, one that could shatter lives. But before the truth could spill from her lips, a shriek pierced the air. Another sound, another desperate plea from behind them, and that unmistakable wail rose again, pulling them back into the depths of an even darker mystery, shaking their resolve. What lay waiting just beyond the threshold of this awakening? What was about to emerge from the shadows? The crowd gasped as the wail crescendoed, a raw and anguished cry that cut through the already charged atmosphere. Eyes turned, faces turned pale, and conversations died mid-sentence. People squinted into the shadows, their collective breaths hitching in their throats. Suddenly, a figure stumbled into view, her clothes torn and dirt-streaked, disheveled and wild-eyed. It was as if she had clawed her way from the depths of despair. The woman's hair whipped in the breeze, giving her an otherworldly appearance. She was gasping for air, but that did nothing to quell the terror in her eyes. "Help! You have to help me!" Her voice was frantic, breaking at the edges. She's coming." A ripple of fear washed over the crowd. People instinctively took a step back, looking around at each other as if someone could provide clarity, but confusion reigned. The bride, feeling a hollow pit in her stomach, searched her mother's face for answers, but the anguish there only deepened her dread. "Who are you?" Margaret moved closer, determined, her determined presence now overshadowed by an unshakable fear. "What are you talking about?" The woman's breath was ragged as she pointed back into the cemetery's thick woods, where shadows danced between the trees like lurking specters. "I saw her. She came after me. She said she would find you." As if on cue, a chilling wind swept through the cemetery, sending shivers down spines. The wail had morphed into a whisper, curling around each person, threading fingers through their thoughts. Who were they really standing beside? "If this is some twisted game," Martin barked out, forcing authority into his wavering voice, "you need to go. This is a private event." But the woman wasn't listening. She pushed through the crowd, desperation coursing through her every move. "No, you don't understand." Tears streamed down her face, glistening like broken glass. "She's not just going to stop. You all need to leave now. Please." Panic surged like a wave, and the crowd shifted uneasily, whispers escalating into frenzied discussions. The bride stepped back, her heart racing wildly against the cage of her ribs. She felt lost in a maelstrom of secrets, lies, and unknown threats. Her wedding day had transformed into a chaotic battleground where shadows emerged to reveal unspeakable truths. Margaret's expression softened into something distant, sorrowful as she reached for the girl's arm, though uncertainty flooded her features. "I can't run. We can't just leave this behind. We have to face it." As if summoned by the weight of those words, a figure appeared at the edge of the grove. Tall and cloaked, the silhouette hovered just beyond reach, the darkness eating away at its form. The crowd fell silent, breaths held like promises, as fear tightened around them. Martin stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice steady but rigid with rising panic. The figure did not respond. It merely watched with an unyielding intensity. "That's it," the woman screamed, breaking the trance. "Run! She's coming for him." The wordlessness shattered, and the crowd erupted into chaos, people scrambling away, hearts pounding as adrenaline kicked in. Martin stood frozen, his eyes piercing into the darkness as if battling an unseen enemy. "Martin!" the bride shouted, grasping for his arm. But he shook her off, principles colliding with fear as a palpable tension filled the air. Then, just when it seemed like they were in the throes of a nightmare, a scream echoed from the woods. The crowd's eyes darted back to the figure, and they watched as the figure began to step forward, each movement deliberate, like a predator closing in. Clarity cracked in the bride's mind. This was no longer about weddings or family ties, or ghosts from the past. It was a fight for survival. And everything was about to change. What did this figure want? What would it reveal? Would they uncover the truth? Or was it already too late? The bride bolted forward, her heart racing as adrenaline surged through her veins. She couldn't just stand still while chaos erupted around her. Martin was still caught in the magnetic pull of the figure, a gaunt silhouette that loomed larger with every heartbeat. "Martin, we need to go." Her voice trembled but pierced the cacophony, fighting through the panic, but Martin remained paralyzed, eyes locked on the dark figure that seemed to siphon the very light from the air. Moments stretched into eternity. The veil of uncertainty thickened, wrapping around the crowd like fog. "Martin!" she shouted again, desperation spilling over as she reached for him. Finally, he blinked and seemed to snap from the trance. He turned, gripping her shoulders fiercely. "We have to get everyone out of here," he said, urgency pouring from his voice as he took charge of the gathering hysteria. The woman, still gasping and wide-eyed, pushed past them, her words spilling forth like a torrent. "This isn't just about you. She'll take more than one life tonight." Her voice echoed through the confusion, driving straight into their hearts. "Stop!" Martin shouted, but it felt weak against the rising storm of panic. The shadowy figure moved closer, just a step, but it felt like a mile. The crowd began to back up instinctively, shrieks and cries merging into a chilling symphony of fear. The bride felt a creeping cold seep into her bones. What did this entity want? Was it the same presence this woman had encountered? In her chest, the fear twisted, and a heaviness settled over her like a dark cloud. She pulled away from Martin, even though every part of her screamed to stay close. "We need to protect the others," she urged, glancing over her shoulder at the growing tide of terrified people, frantically searching for safety. But as she turned back, a visage emerged from the gloom. The figure finally stepped into the light, a face drawn and hollow, eyes shimmering like black glass. It was haunting, yet achingly familiar. The light short-circuited her thoughts as recognition crashed over her like a tidal wave. "No, it can't be," she murmured, her breath hitching in her throat. The figure grinned, an eerie smile spreading across its lips. "You've forgotten me. But I haven't forgotten you, dear bride." A wave of heat rushed through her, and the crowd gasped in unison. Shivers danced down her spine. She had been aware of her family's secrets, the long-buried skeletons in the closets, but this was different. This was a threat from the past, wrapped in shadows and aimed directly at what she held most dear. "Run!" shouted Margaret, snapping everyone back to reality as her maternal instincts kicked in. She pushed forward, forcing people along, but the bride felt rooted to the spot, caught between worlds, the one filled with love and happiness, and the one darkened by whispers of vengeance. The cloaked figure tilted its head, observing the chaos with a chilling calm. "You cannot escape your fate," it hissed, the words like ice blown through crackling branches. "I will take what is mine." "Get back," Martin urged, stepping protectively between the bride and the looming figure, fists clenched. "You will not touch her. I swear it." But the figure merely laughed, a sound that echoed like broken glass in the air. "Your promises mean nothing." It pointed a finger heavy with intent. "Everything you knew would shatter." Just like that. The bride felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Beside her, Margaret grasped her arm, her eyes wide with dread. And then she felt it, a sudden crack in the air, a shattering sound, as if the very fabric of reality was fraying at the edges. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted an object rolling toward them, a small glimmering locket, stained with earth and tears. She recognized it instantly. It belonged to her mother, and witnessing its movement pulled her deeper into an abyss of understanding. "Mom, it's the locket!" she shouted, both realization and horror flooding her voice. But before she could reach it, as if a spell had been cast, the crowd turned to chaos once more. The figure stepped closer, oblivious to the fear swirling like a storm. "Time is running out," it warned before the dark shadows melded together, flickering briefly before fading. Had they seen the last of it, or was the nightmare just beginning? With a racing heart, she took a step forward, daring to confront the truth buried within the horrific revelation. What would she discover about the family's past, their unseen bonds and secrets? As the locket spun slowly in the air, she felt the pull to it like a moth to a flame. Would it illuminate their path? Or lead her deeper into darkness? The bride's instincts kicked in, dragging her towards the locket. Each roll across the ground felt magnified, echoing like a drum in her heart. "Martin, help me," she gasped, feeling a draw that transcended fear. She had to know that he hesitated, torn between the looming threat and her desperate pull. "We can't risk it." But even as he said it, his eyes darted back to the figure, whose presence felt like an unrelenting tide threatening to drown them all. Ignoring the chaos, she bent down to grasp the locket, her fingers trembling as she cradled it in her palm. A rush of warmth flooded through her, momentarily eclipsing the fear that gripped her heart. "Mom," she whispered, feeling a connection tethered to the past. But was it strength or a siren's call? Then, a shriek sliced through the reverberating fear. A woman staggered back, her hand pressed to her throat, eyes bulging in horror. "It's here! It's here!" she shrieked, and just like that, the crowd erupted anew. Panic spilled like ink on paper. People surged this way and that, each soul searching for a way out as if the walls themselves had closed in. Martin grabbed the bride's arm, trying to pull her back. "We need to go now." But she was rooted, entranced by the locket's engraved surface. The initials CM were unmistakable. "This is my mother's," she said, heart racing as memories flickered like old film reels. Her mother's laughter, the warnings whispered late at night, the family secrets lingering like shadows. The figure was gone, but dread seeped into her bones. "What do you want?" she shouted, her voice barely a whisper against the mounting hysteria. But deep down, she feared she already knew. Martin's grip tightened, pulling her towards the exit. "We have to leave. I won't let her take you. We need to find somewhere safe." The bride tore her gaze from the locket, panic clashing against her curiosity. "Martin, the locket, it holds something, doesn't it? I can feel it. Stop it. Your life is worth more than some silly trinket," he shouted, desperation quaking his voice as they stumbled backward. The crowd pressing into that moment. The air around them crackled with tension. A sudden cold wafted through the hall, creating eerie shadows that flickered in the corners of her vision. There, out of the darkness, emerged a shadow, the figure returning. Faster this time, desperation turned to fear. She felt Martin's body tense beside her, ready to shield her from the impending doom. Just as the figure lunged, the locket in her hand began to vibrate, sending shocks through her fingertips. A jolt that spoke of memories trapped in weights unbalanced. With a final shriek that echoed against the walls, the figure reached out, not for her, but for the locket. "Give it to me," it howled, the voice unraveling into a shrill crescendo that seemed to split the very air. In that split second, everything slowed. The energy of the locket pulsed like a heartbeat, a tether between then and now, temptation and the truth. "Please don't," she cried, feeling the unforgiving grip of fate clawing at her conscience. Here she stood at the brink of revealing a truth that could shatter their world or save it. Yet before she could decide, the locket slipped from her fingers, falling into the chaos of twisted feet and frantic hands. The world around her spun wildly, and a piercing scream permeated the air, stilling her heart in dread. Would the locket unlock the secrets her family had buried? Or would it unravel their lives forever? As Martin pulled her away against the crowd's tide, one question throbbed in her mind. Could she really leave it all behind? The truth was out there, clawing to be set free. The chaos swirled around them, a whirlwind of panic that clawed at her resolve. Martin dragged her through the throng, but her mind was caught in a fog. Staring back at the crowd, she felt the sharp pang of loss, the locket now just a fleeting glimpse of what was. A scream echoed, haunting. Was it from someone who'd seen the figure? Or was it just another victim of fear? "Keep moving," Martin urged, his voice strained. The urgency in his tone snagged her focus, but her pulse raced, mirroring the panic that filled the hall. As they pushed toward the exit, the oppressive air weighed down like thick fog, smothering her thoughts. But then came the whispers. Conversations strung together in fear and dread. "Did you see that? It was a woman. What is she after? The locket." Those fragments rushed through her like electric currents, igniting anger and confusion. The locket was the key, it always had been. "Martin, I can't just run away," she shouted, jerking her arm free. He looked back at her with alarm. the flicker of disbelief crossing his face as she turned to face the chaos once more. The crowd was still churning, but now she could see the figure, lingering at the edge of the dance floor, a silhouette draped in darkness, hovering like a specter, watching with hungry eyes. "What are you doing?" he hissed, stepping toward her. Fear mingled with desperation in his gaze, but the pull of that shadow was stronger than her love for him. "I need to know," she replied fiercely. The words burst forth, raw and unfiltered. Every instinct told her to flee, but every heartbeat pulled her back toward the secrets, whirling around her like leaves in a storm. With a breath that felt like fire in her chest, she approached the shadow, feeling the electric thrum of the locket still tingling in her palm. The world blurred around her, sounds fading into a muffled roar. Every ounce of fear condensed into a single question. What did her mother wish to protect? Was it worth the risk? As she stepped through the tumult, the figure turned slightly, revealing a pale face etched with sorrow and longing. "You don't understand," it sang, the voice sweet yet laced with agonizing tension. "You must not make the same mistakes." "Who are you?" she forced out, feeling ghosts weaving through her thoughts. The air grew dense as if space itself was baited, holding its breath in anticipation of her answer. And that moment, the promise of the locket and the weight of its legacy collided harshly. The crowd surged forward, but her path was set. She steadied herself against the tidal force of history and destiny. Suddenly, a glimmer of recognition sparked in that haunting gaze. The shadow lifted a hand, as if to touch her, but stopped short. "You are the one who holds the truth that must remain buried. You must give the locket to me." "No." It ripped through her lips like shards of glass, raw and bleeding. She could feel the energy pulsating from its dark presence, wrestling with her spirit, and every fiber of her being revolted. The locket pulsed in her hand, alive with whispers of the past. "You do not want to know what is on the other side of knowledge," it screamed, a blend of rage and despair. The fear in its words clashed horrifically against the surge of determination within her. Martin reached for her, but she was anchored in place, a soldier facing the enemy. "What happens if I do?" she asked, her voice shaky but resolute. "Everything," the shadow moaned, its anguished answer cutting through the mounting tumult, chilling her to the bone as the screams of the crowd intensified, and the reality of her choices closed in. She hesitated just a moment too long, a split second suspended in time, and then, everything went dark. Would she find the truth hidden in the locket or unleash a darkness she could never recant? The questions pulsed in her head like a beating drum as she plunged into the unknown. The darkness wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. Silence enveloped her senses, and in that eerie stillness, the world outside faded into nothingness. She didn't know how long she was trapped in the void. It felt like an eternity, filled only with the echo of her own heartbeat. Frantic and swift, she gasped, the air suddenly rushing back into her lungs, and she found herself standing in an empty room, the stark white walls closing in around her. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet. Confusion surged through her as she struggled to piece together her surroundings. Where was everyone? Where was Martin? Had she really stepped into some alternate reality with that shadow figure? The locket grew warm in her palm, a pulse of life that seemed to connect her to the truth within the shadows. Images flickered through her mind, memories not her own. A woman shrouded in despair, tears glistening on porcelain cheeks, the locket gleaming like a lighthouse of hope in a storm of regret. "Tell me," she cried into the void, her voice trembling but fierce. "What do you want from me?" "Everything," a voice replied, echoing in the hollow space, deep and somber, much like the shadow's. "You've already begun to unravel it, your mother's choices, her fears, and now your own." "No." Panic surged within her. "I won't let you manipulate me. I will not become a prisoner of the past." In that moment, shadows began to drift along the walls, taking form. Faces emerged, blurred yet hauntingly familiar. Her mother, her grandmother, even childhood friends, all cloaked in sorrow, whispering words that tumbled into her mind like an avalanche. She focused, intent on drowning out the relentless tide of emotion. The locket throbbed, urging her to listen, to comprehend. "Do you see?" they murmured, their voices intertwined in a haunting chorus. "The choices we made, the secrets we buried with our lives." A flood of realization crashed over her, drowning her heart in tumult. Her family had fled from something, hidden themselves away from the consequences of their truths. And now that dark legacy was hers to confront. She felt the weight of their decisions pressing down on her shoulders. No. She shook her head defiantly. You can't make me wear that burden. I'm not my mother. Or her mother. I'm my own person. The shadows flickered, their forms wavering as if in disbelief. The locket vibrated violently in her hand, as if sensing her resistance, and a sudden fire ignited in her chest. She felt the ground beneath her shift, trembling with the weight of her choice. She could either face these demons head-on or let them consume her. Your mother couldn't change her fate, came the chilling whispers. But a crack split the silence, and for a brief moment, the light poured in from the now open door behind her, illuminating the figures, exposing their pain. Was she ready to face it all? Mom, she whispered, realizing as she stepped toward the light that her journey had just begun. With each step, the shadows writhed and shrank, straining against the glow that grew bolder. Suddenly, the room trembled violently, and the shadows howled in a chaotic frenzy. Do not turn away, they screamed, desperation flooding their voices. You cannot escape your lineage. Staring into the light, she hesitated. The truth of the locket danced on the edge of her consciousness, a shimmering promise and a terrifying burden. And behind her the darkness swirled, a nefarious presence that loomed ever closer. The remnants of her family's past, eager to reclaim what she had wrestled free. What awaited her beyond that door? Would she step into the light or plunge deeper into the shadows? The decision weighed heavily as she took a breath, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Would she shatter their cycle of fear? Or would the darkness wrap around her once more, binding her fate to her ancestors' choices? The light flickered, and in that moment, everything hung in the balance. The light swelled, beckoning her like a siren's call. She felt its warmth, a stark contrast against the icy grip of the shadows behind her. Yet, a surge of dread coursed through her veins. What if the light did not bring salvation but rather despair? Do you truly believe you can change? The voices taunted, reverberating around her, shaking her resolve to its core. Step back into our world, they pleaded. A unified cry that shook the very walls, causing cracks to spider across the pristine surface. You are one of us. The locket pulsed, hotter now, a beacon straining against the darkness. With an ounce of defiance left, she raised it, its glow intensifying, illuminating the swirling shadows. A chaotic dance of sorrow and unresolved regret pressed against the light, morphing it into a battlefield. Stop it, she gasped, clutching her ears to drown out the cacophony of her ancestors' voices. She fought to remember Martin, the life they had started to build. He believed in her, in everything she could be. She couldn't abandon him, not to the past, not to these vengeful shadows. With a deep breath that rattled within her chest, she shouted, I am more than your mistakes. I choose my future. Those words hung in the air like a thunderclap, the shadows recoiling as if struck, and then, just as she felt the slightest flicker of hope, the ground convulsed beneath her. You will regret this. The shadows twisted into a vortex, swirling like a storm ready to engulf her whole. Suddenly a wicked chill enveloped her. The temperature dropped, and a figure stepped into the light. She hardly recognized him at first. Martin. His face twisted in confusion, eyes wide as he called her name. Is this where you've been? Martin. Her heart soared and plummeted simultaneously. She wanted to reach for him, to pull him into the promise of light and warmth. But the shadows clawed closer, their desperate whispers urging him to turn around, to flee. Stay away, she screamed, desperation flooding her voice. But something flickered behind Martin's eyes, a shadow of understanding mixing with fear. What is happening? You're in danger. You need to come with me. No, she shouted, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. I have to face them. I can't let their choices chain us both. In that instant the shadows writhed, trying to weave their way between them. Foolish girl, they jeered. You think you can rewrite history? You're one of us whether you like it or not. Before she could respond, the world around them melted into an amalgamation of swirling colors and despair, time distorting. She stumbled as memories washed over her, the laughter, the tears, the dark secrets that had plagued her family for generations. They were there, surrounding her like an ocean of pain. It felt endless, suffocating. No, she cried again, straining against the tide. I won't drown in this. I refuse to be a prisoner of your legacy. With a fierce scream, she thrust the locket forward, directing all her courage into it. And for a moment the locket glimmered brilliantly, an explosion of light piercing the shadows. But in the chaos Martin faltered, lost in the swirling mass of whispers. His eyes filled with terror as the darkness clawed at him. "I don't want to lose you," he shouted, reaching out, desperately trying to break through. And that moment of uncertainty, she felt the bonds of the past tightening around her heart. Join us or lose him. What would she choose? The light was promising relief, yet the shadows were tempting her with the comfort of familiarity. "Martin!" She lunged forward, but was thrown back as the darkness surged forth, ready to reclaim what it thought was its. Would she free herself from the weight of generations? Could courage overpower the horror of her family's legacy? Everything teetered on the edge as she focused on Martin's fading figure, the connection between them fragile. Time seemed to shatter and spread as the locket vibrated violently in her grasp, urging her to seize the moment. In that heartbeat of a choice, the immensity of her family's legacy loomed larger than ever. Suddenly, everything felt impossibly still. What would happen if she surrendered to the shadows? If she defied them? The answer burned like a wildfire within her as she prepared to take that leap into uncertainty. Her destiny awaited. Would it be redemption or doom? Light flooded her senses, igniting every fiber of her being as she steadied herself, holding the locket like a beacon of hope. The shadows swirled and writhed around her, gnashing and clawing at her resolve. Behind them, Martin's face twisted in fear and desperation. "Please, don't forget me," he cried, his voice echoing through the tumult like a lifeline tossed into raging waves. She had a choice: succumb to the shadows or rise against them. Fear wrapped around her like a cloak, but defiance bubbled to the surface. She was not her mother. She would not be bound by the sorrowful legacy of generations past. "I choose light," she shouted, the words erupting from her throat, fueled by the love she had for Martin and the life they could build together. The locket responded, pulsating with warmth, illuminating brighter and brighter, casting the shadows into retreat. "No!" the whispers screamed, desperation clawing at their frayed edges as the light surged forth. "You belong to us!" they howled, but their threats faltered in the face of her resolve. With each heartbeat, she felt the shadows lessen their grip, their anger fading into silence as the light expanded, pushing them back inch by inch. Martin stepped closer, his eyes widening as he watched the incredible transformation. "You're doing it!" he exclaimed, awe weaving through his voice. The shadows hissed, fading against the radiant glow of the locket. The darkness, once alive with vengeful intent, now trembled and withered, creeping back into the void from whence it came. With a final burst of strength, she raised the locket high, allowing its light to pierce through the chaos swirling around her. "I reject you!" A whirlwind of warmth surged through her as memories of laughter, love, and everything good wrapped around her heart like a shield. The darkness collided with the barbed edges of light, a deadly dance that crackled in the air, sending sparks of energy spiraling into the void. Every shadow, every whisper, each remnant of fear fell away. In her heart, she felt the weight of her ancestors lifting, freeing her from the chains of regret. At last, there was a moment of stillness. The air crackled with possibility, and she felt Martin's hand slip into hers, their fingers intertwining as the shadows crumbled into dust. "You're incredible," he breathed, relief flooding his features. "You saved us." She could hardly catch her breath, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the choice she had made, a choice that defined her. "I faced my past and I won," she whispered. Yet the journey had shifted something deep within her. She understood then that it wasn't merely about conquering shadows. It was about embracing her identity and creating her own path. As the final echoes of darkness faded, a soft light enveloped them both, illuminating their surroundings, revealing a clear path ahead. Together they stepped forward, away from the cemetery, the place that had once held so much turmoil, now transformed into a garden of new beginnings. Outside, the sun began to peek through the clouds, rays of light flooding over the landscape like a promise renewed. The wedding celebration had shifted from chaos into a tender blend of joy, laughter, and a second chance built on understanding and love. Every face they passed was transformed, eyes sparkled with awe, and whispers turned into cheers of relief as people recognized what had transpired. Amidst the crowd, Margaret wept softly, her expression filled with pride and gratitude. "You did it, darling," she murmured as they approached. The bride hugged her mother tight, joyfully aware of the invisible threads of connection now woven between them. "We're stronger together," she spoke softly. And as the music began to play again, she and Martin exchanged looks filled with promise, their hands still clasped, united against the world. The shadows might always linger at the edges of their lives, but from that moment on they vowed to confront them together, hand in hand. The wedding event wasn't merely a celebration, it was a rebirth. They would cherish their past but not be bound by time. Was theirs now, a gift beyond measure waiting to be filled with all the stories yet to be told. As they danced beneath the open sky, the world around them glowed with possibility and hope. The story was theirs to create, echoing the legacy of light that would shine brighter than any shadow ever could. Now, let us not let this moment slip away. You need to subscribe now so you won't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your wild reactions and theories about this conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible ending. Your support means everything.